As leaders gather in Nairobi for the AFDB's 60th anniversary, all eyes are on its strategy for the next decade. President of the bank, Akiwumi Adesina, says in the next 10 years, the bank's aim is to build on the high fives, priorities it set out between 2013 and 2022 to light up and power Africa, and to feed, industrialize, integrate and improve the quality of life for the people on the continent.
We're not there where we need to be, but with the high fives we will get there. Because even the United Nations Development Program agreed that if Africa were to run those high fives, Africa will achieve 90% of the Sustainable Development Goals. And Africa will also achieve 90% of the Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want of the African Union.
At this year's meetings, the African Development Bank and its member states will be tackling one major issue: Africa's structural transformation. Now, according to the bank, Africa's debt outlook is not improving. In fact, many more African countries are carrying on even more debt than they did before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, this year they'll be discussing the risk this poses to Africa's debt outlook and its achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
That process, everybody agrees, is too slow. You know, if you're going to, if you have somebody that is bleeding and you want to save their life, stop the bleeding faster. Because by the time that you actually do it, they may be dead. And so what you find African countries asking for is a speedier implementation and execution of those global mechanisms to deal with the issue of debt.
Also topping the agenda is reform. Leaders are looking to challenge the global architecture of the financial system. They're looking for one that better supports Africa's development needs.
Africa wasn't there when the global financial architecture systems were being developed. And therefore, the Bretton Woods systems were developed without Africa. And that's been the rule ever since then. One of the big things that Africa is asking about is Africa needs more voice, and Africa needs participation at the table that has to do with global issues. Africa will not be a bystander in institutions and on issues and on platforms that affect its own development globally.
But perhaps one of the most pressing questions for African leaders is how to mobilize the resources for ambitious projects in areas such as green growth and the just energy transition. Well, at this year's meeting, Africa's development financial institutions set out a plan to stimulate cooperation within the continent that would enable African nations to access funding appropriate to their needs.
I think key conversations we shall be having this week is, as DFIs, is how do we access this financing to be able to invest in greening businesses, in greening investments in the economy, in making more sustainable and environmental friendly investments. And current conversations are, how do we actually access the money? Where are these funds? So it would be then hoping that the various bilateral meetings we'll be having can be able to demystify this, and of course now create individual roadmaps for respective financial institutions to then access the financing.
It is clear that this year is not just about the AFDB's progress so far. The African Development Bank is advocating for a renewed partnership with governments, the private sector and institutions like the World Bank. Relationships in which Africa is better represented. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.